After previously enjoying Post Scriptum at the start of the year, I linked to that video in the top right and in the description below. I was lucky enough to be invited by the devs to look at a pre-release build of their Chapter 3 Day of Days update for this early access game. And just before we go on, in my normal full disclosure way, I was given a key to access the game by the devs to allow me to make videos about Post Scriptum, just like this one. The meat of this Day of Day updates is the addition of 2 new maps, Utah Beach and Glees. Their associated sides cosmetics, uniforms, all kind of stuff like that, and specific weaponry like tanks and rifles, and it's clearly a significant effort to keep the 2 sides of the game looking accurate and in period for the locations that they're now fighting in. Furthermore, a 3rd map, the famous Carantan, will be released later. It was set to be included with the rest of this update, but it seems to require a little more time in the development oven before it reaches the quality standards the devs want for its release. And what you're going to see from the other maps now shows that the quality that the team is producing is indeed increasing. For those new to Post Scriptum, it's probably a good idea to say that this is a hardcore FPS game that focuses on team play and coordination above everything else. These updates, these chapters, aren't diluting that core focus at all. So for the people who want this kind of game, where it's all about a squad of players doing their best in incredible situations, then Post Scriptum is very much keeping its course. In an even shorter way, put it like this: if you played Squad and you enjoyed it, then you already know that Post Scriptum is your sort of game. But let's talk about what's new. The first map we played was Utah Beach, and was probably the first indicator of the step change that we've seen from the Post Scriptum devs in raising that quality bar. It was, for the first time, like playing a set piece from a film or famous TV show. Gone was the arbitrary spawn locations in the middle of a field somewhere, and in was the genuine tension of standing on a landing craft as it powers its way towards the shore. Explosions showering water into the air as we arrived at our terrible location. And it's everything you expect as you land. It's confusing and bewildering and brutal. There's even less room for that FPS lone wolfing than Post Scriptum normally allows, and that's already pretty much 0. It's a grind up the beach, using smokes to obscure and tanks as shields to try and make your way to the new destroyable objectives that are included in this new invasion game mode. This being Utah Beach, there's no cliff-like land to climb up. Instead, there's significant open ground to clear before you can reach anything like decent cover. But once up, the transition into urban townscapes is almost surprising given the contrast to the open beaches and explosions that you just navigated. It's an awesome, exhausting experience on first acquaintance, but again it feels true to the real-life events and true to the style of game that Post Scriptum is designed to be. There is some artistic license used here to preserve user experience. Things like the allies can't be killed in their landing craft as they arrive initially, and just imagine how annoying it would be to die before you'd even properly spawned. But when the front ramp of that landing craft drops, there's absolutely no doubt that this experience is trying to be as accurate as possible. And just a quick aside to say, if you do like this video, please do tap the thumb up button. It really helps me with YouTube and discoverability and all stuff like that. So if you choose to do so, then thank you, it really is appreciated. The other map is Eglise, and again we're treated to a proper introduction to the map in an authentic way. Playing as the US forces, you spawn in a drop plane on a dark night, the outside world filled with searchlights and anti-aircraft flak fire. Jumping out into the darkness, you float quietly down and find yourself disorientated and split from the rest of your forces. This confusion feels credible, and the dead of night that you struggle with gives it a real sense of danger and sort of claustrophobia. You just don't know where the danger is coming from and when. It's perhaps not the open vista of World War II maps that you imagine when you're thinking about the genre, but as a contrast to the other maps in the game, it certainly feels different and has its place. The intense urban fighting within the town at night also feels interesting and different to normal. There's nothing quite like having an enemy tank rumble past the building you are in as you cower behind the window frame. All this navigating buildings and other urban locations does segue into another improvement to Post Scriptum that we've had since those other new maps in January. During that video, I mentioned that the lack of internal dressing to those rooms, which is something that initially doesn't sound like a massive problem, but it actually gave the whole environment a sort of fake feeling, like the whole world was just like a movie set or something. I'm happy to say that in these 2 new maps, the buildings are properly furnished and feel true to their intended locations. I knew it would make a difference, but I'm actually surprised about how much it adds to the sense of place and of storytelling. This isn't the work of a moment for the developers, so I'm glad that they're choosing to spend their resources on rendering the world in an as authentic and respectful detail as possible, all these elements really do add up to more than the sum of their parts. It's partly speculation, but that does also segue into one issue I did have with these new maps, and that is performance. Now, as I've mentioned before, I have quite an old system. I still have a 970 GPU, and if the world hadn't been quite so odd recently, I'd hope to have that sorted by now. But anyway, it makes me a little hesitant to complain about absolute performance, as I know a lot of people are using computers quite a bit faster than this one. However, at times, frame rates were struggling, and it seemed to almost happen in waves. I could have smooth gameplay above 60 FPS 1 second, and then real drops the next. I don't know if it was related to loading assets in some way, but I can't help think that these newly richly populated worlds were perhaps causing some problems for the game. And looking at the Chapter 3 announcement message on Steam, we can see that the devs do in fact mention performance. We are aware of the performance issues with Chapter 3. This is due to the scale and density in detail amongst other things. We will be working continuously over the next few weeks to bring the performance closer to Chapter 1 and 2. So this is a known issue, but hopefully one that the devs can get a handle on and lift performance back to the levels that we saw before. And if we're talking about issues, then I did experience some other bugs in that pre-release build of the game. It was mainly minor issues, things like my left mouse button was initially bound to both fire and aim down sights, which was confusing initially, but it's the kind of thing that you'd expect from an actively developed game in early access. I'd say the worst bug I experienced was probably the map disappearing from the respawn screen, which made it difficult to gauge where I should really be spawning. It wasn't a complete blocker, I could still pick locations and spawn in, but you know, it was a problem nonetheless. Having been away from the game for a short time, it was nice to come back and re-experience those high points that Post Scriptum has already created. And if I can nerd out again for a second, but those weapon sounds continue to be some of the best and most authoritative feeling audio in gaming today. I'll link to my other video in the description below, but to a specific part where I actually stop talking and let you hear the audio at normal levels, because it really is a high watermark for this sort of work. The suppression system, something that you find in Squad as well, is really nice to bring more balance and realism to the game. In short, there's real value on firing near people, not just at them. Suppression has audio and visual effects to those on the receiving end, so that old movie line of suppressive fire while someone runs into danger actually has relevance in Post Scriptum. It makes things like machine guns almost as much about area denial and psychologically pressuring the opposing forces as it does about direct firing. Then there's the difference in how you react with other players as well. I played Battlefield 5 recently, and, I enjoyed it for what it was. They make much about squad play, but in all that time that I played that game, I didn't chat with those other players. They could have been well-coded AI, and I really wouldn't have known. Well, interaction with others is at the heart of games like Post Scriptum. The experience really lives or dies on whether the members of your squad are all of the same mindset, and then have someone willing to lead them and focus their collective abilities. Confusion is a killer in these games, so having people with mics calling out what they see so they can have their allies making informed decisions is of huge value. Though, don't worry if you're not the talkative type. Most good server players seem happy as long as you're listening and following orders. When you're in one of those good squads on a good server, and try clan servers if you're looking around, they often have people on them looking to play the game properly, then I find that games like these provide some of the most enjoyable moments in online gaming today. For player base, well, it's not in the same realm as something like Squad, which still feels like something of an outlier, but it does have a decent and apparently dedicated group of people who play regularly. Also, the free weekends are getting it in front of a lot of people, and in fact, this weekend's Play for Free event on Steam has the game at its all-time highest concurrent users at over 7,000 players. So, is it worth playing? Well, I continue to enjoy my time with Post Scriptum. It might not have the cinematic visual style of something like Hell Let Loose, but in other ways, such as audio and some really great map design, it absolutely earns its own place in the world of hardcore FPS's best titles. The game is normally £24.50 in the UK, about $30 in the US, and €28 in the EU. But at the moment, until the 27th of April 2020, there is 25% off those prices. And if you want to try the game out, like I just said, then there is a Play for Free event on Steam right now. So if you're thinking you might like the game, then now is the perfect time to try it out for yourself. I'm very interested to know what you think of Post Scriptum. Do you like hardcore games like these? Are you a squad player looking to find a different world to play in? Should I do another video looking at Karantan when that is in fact released? Let me know your powerful thoughts and feelings by leaving a comment below right now. I'll of course be reading every single one of them. If you did like this video, press all the things, the thumb button, the sub button, and all those other things that people tell you to do at the end of YouTube videos. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care.